Four, three, two, one. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, JD. Hello, Doug. How,
What's
how are
up?
you guys doing?
We're doing good tonight.
Pretty good. Thumbs up.
That's good to hear. How's your summer been so far?
Same as
Lazy.
yours, sitting inside, but we're dealing with it.
Yeah, I guess we all have to deal with that. It is better in Florida than most places, so that's always a plus.
My AC's
I
been
Mhm.
wanted
going out
I
recently.
wanted to start today's conversation about a recent controversy, or not really controversy, but a thing in the news about the mayor of Jacksonville who overnight essentially removed a Confederate statue um, due to the wake of the George Floyd protests. I wanted to know what's your opinion on that?
Which statue did he remove? I don't
I
really
think it
remember.
was of a Confederate general, if I'm thinking correctly.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm sure he's. I don't know if you saw the one statue, I think somewhere in Europe, ended up getting tossed into a river. I saw
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. It
So he's
was like,
probably looking to not be in that sort of situation because that's kind of a
Mhm.
PR disaster. Like, do you take it out? Do you leave it down there? And what do you do? So,
Yeah.
the way I see it, it's like I guess the short of it is I guess I agree with it.
Mhm.
The long of it is that yeah, I believe it should be taken down like personally, but I'm just hoping that there's some sort of like preservation
Mhm.
of it. Like it just if it's stored in a warehouse and not in the public, that's fine with me because you always have to like preserve art, and I believe it's like important to like document like the history of like art and like how things were made and how things were presented like over like time periods. It's always like really important, and like
yeah.
statues are a part of that for sure. But keeping these like icons of the Confederacy up such a long time after its dissolution, and the fact that like the reason why these Confederate statues really even exist today or were like really commissioned and stuff like that is because of I forgot exactly what it was called, but
Most
like
most of them were built in the 20th century, right?
yes,
So
It's not like it was
after,
right after the Civil
it
War.
was yeah,
that's
it was
really
after it
odd.
was yeah. Well, the reason why is because the people in the South who identified with like the Confederacy, they essentially tried to propagate the ideas that the Confederacy was like
Oh,
okay, and
right.
tried
Yeah,
to like
yeah.
rewrite sort of history by commissioning these statues, by changing textbooks, um, like popularizing use of like the Confederate flag, like things like that in the South, and basically like I think it's like the Lost Battle, or like it has a name.
Mm,
It
Yeah,
has
it's like
an
the people that are like the Civil War was fought over states' rights, and then you say like
yeah.
states' right to what? It's
yeah,
like,
you know.
hmm
I
I
forgot.
think like on the Constitution thing, I think like the Confederate Constitution actually like had less rights. It was basically a copy paste of the Union
yeah.
Constitution, but like it had even less rights.
Right,
So
right.
yeah.
Do we know
Um,
where the statue was put? Was it put into like a museum, or was it?
so I'm looking at the article right now. So there was an order to remove all the monuments in Jacksonville, um, but they had just removed the
Mhm.
statue in Hemingway Park. But I don't think they have designated a place for it to be right now.
Well, hopefully it goes to like I mean, it would be interesting if it went to like a museum of like maybe Civil War memorabilia, but I guess it's not really
Mhm.
Civil War because it was
Yeah.
probably made with all the
Yeah.
other ones in the 20th
Well, I
century.
mean, it's concerning like the Civil War, obviously. Like
Yeah.
again, these things are made to like sort of glorify the South and
Yeah.
like perpetuate a history that's not true. But at the same time, they still hold artistic value. I mean,
Mhm.
everything
Sure.
does. You
Or you could
know.
just melt them down. That could be
Well,
arranged, I'm sure.
okay, yeah. Does melted down copper hold historical value, Doug?
I mean,
No, it doesn't. That's the short
I'm
of it.
sure
It
it
doesn't.
holds. I'm sure it holds value in terms of like making wire. No, I agree with JD. I think it's like these ways of remembering. It's important to remember them, but maybe they shouldn't be up in places that like we all see and are like, ooh, that's just it might be distasteful to have it like out in public, in my
Mhm.
opinion. Um, And obviously these things probably shouldn't have been made in the first place because they were after the Civil War. If it was like during the Civil War, these statues had been
That's
made
okay.
for them, that would make more sense. And even
So-
still, it doesn't like make them good.
All right, I found the name of like the phenomena. It's hold on, I'm gonna turn off my background. I'm like clipping in existence, but basically like it's called like the Lost Cause, and it was sort of like spearheaded by like the United Daughters of the Confederacy, and basically it's a bunch of like Southern like really rich people essentially commissioning things like statues, making like wiggling their way into like education boards to like help rewrite how like history is taught in the South. And I think it like got to the point where textbooks that described like slave master relations as being like friendly up until like
Yeah, I read a lot
past the
of
20th
that,
century. It's fucking ridiculous.
and I just thought it
So
was totally normal. I
when
was like,
people
oh, that's how it was.
and the thing is like when people say like it's our culture, it's kind of sad because it's manufactured to
Yeah.
for the sole purpose of validating the Confederacy and nothing else. Like your culture is based off of an excuse
True.
Yeah.
for an existence of the Confederacy. Like that's not
It's
a
like-
culture.
As a follow-up, do you think like the fact that a lot of these statues are like memorials to fallen soldiers changes that in any sense?
I feel like if
I
we're
both
going
just, like,
off
took a
of
breath.
if we're going off of like the fact that they were commissioned by these like Southern socialites
Mhm.
to propagate like the lost cause of rewriting history of the South, then I feel like it doesn't matter. I feel like that's just padding for this justification, and it's just like there to sort of like like safeguard it and like legitimize it.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Well, what if it's a memorial that was made like right after the Civil War, so it's like legitimate in a sense?
I guess that makes more sense.
I guess it makes more sense. However, I still feel like even in that case, it probably should be taken down, put in a
Or
warehouse.
moved, I think.
Like
to
Indiana
maybe a
Jones
museum.
style.
I know it's not really an issue, but like a lot of the statues that are removed, they just end up in a warehouse and like nobody sees them.
Yeah.
Do you think it's better for them to end up in a museum?
Yeah, absolutely. If
Because
they-
I know a big issue with like the museum proposition is like there's no like room essentially in the museums that exist right now. So like where would they get the funding to house these new statues?
Well, it's obviously important to.
I mean, it's up to the
have
communities.
history. Yeah, it's important
know,
to have
like-
history and remember that stuff. I don't think it should just be thrown away. If there's a way to keep them around in a positive manner, then I think that should be done. But until
Mhm.
that is like a way for that to be done is thought out, I don't see any problem with keeping them in warehouses.
I don't really
And
feel
then-
like there is. I
No,
was just
no,
gonna say I
that's
don't really
fine.
feel like there is like a positive manner to like hold them in. I think like it should be just used as like in museums, but as a sort of way of like reflection on America's past. And
Exactly.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah.
Like
And-
Holocaust museums in Germany.
Right. And the way I see it, it's like it's up to communities to decide whether or not they want to put them in museums. Like it's not
Mhm.
like the United States is going to be like, look, we're going to make a bunch of museums to put Confederate statues, and that's dumb. It's
That would
really
just
just
be
up to
like-
whoever wants it.
Circle back of the old problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then in the UK when they threw the statue into the water essentially, do you think, because I know like with a lot of Civil War people or like slave owners before the Civil War even, because this is a UK figure, he had done a lot for the community. So like on a net cost analysis, like do you think it's better for him to be remembered as a slave owner at the time or what he had done positively for the community?
I think you have to be pretty good to like be remembered as what you were, other than a slave
Yeah.
owner.
Because
Like
that's,
George
that's why
Washington,
that's
the
why I
first
think he
president.
had the statue in the UK, because they outlawed slavery far before we did.
Yeah,
Right.
George Washington. That he's like a
Mhm.
good mark. He owned slaves, but also the first president and like the one who set our nation on its path. That's like a situation where I'm not like, okay, yeah, it's fine that he owned slaves, but it's like I understand with the time it was like so long ago, and he had a great track record.
Mhm.
The way I see it, like, it's not important not to try and like tear down the accomplishments of somebody like that were like good because of like things like that. But at the same time, like you have to really like take that into consideration when like when forming a view on a historical figure. I kind of get why they like threw it into like the river, right? You know, like we need to like try and crack down on like systemic racism that is deeply rooted in our past. And that's kind of like a way of like signaling that, you know, like by the destruction or taking down of these statues. But it's just a statue. I mean, the statue doesn't contain his entire legacy and what he did.
No.
You know, like that surrounds like the UK and like what did he do like specifically? Do you know?
I think here. Let me pull up the article.
Yeah, pull that up, Jamie.
Am I Joey in this situation? Who's
Ah,
Joe? Who's...
fuck him, you monkey.
Oh, he was a
Fuck you,
slave
monkey.
trader, actually. So
He was a
little
traitor.
bit-
Okay,
He was that's a little bit. I would agree. That's a little bit worse than just owning
Yeah.
slaves in a sense. But I know he was also a merchant. His wealth did stem from the slave trade. Philanthropic works.
Okay.
He supported and endowed schools and hospitals and churches in London and other cities. In his charities. Oh, okay. So his charitable organizations only gave to like people who fit like a certain demographic. So they were a little bit discriminative in a sense.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. So he doesn't need to.
Yeah.
Yeah. He,
Not cool.
No.
yeah.
He's not in the cool guys club.
I mean, like, still, like, if he had to be like written in the book, I mean, keep that in.
Yeah, I mean, like
Totally.
maybe like the state or where was this? This is somewhere in.
It was in Bristol.
Yeah,
Okay.
maybe like their
Bristol.
specific history books. If like you're taking a history of Bristol lesson, they got to talk about this guy. But maybe you don't have a statue. Don't like, you know, commemorate him too hard.
So pivoting back to the U.S., I think it was the head of the army or the lead general, the 4-star general of the army, or maybe the spokesperson said essentially like they were reversing their course on renaming the few U.S. Army bases that are named after Confederate generals. Do you think this is like the right course of action considering what happened or what's happened in recent news, or do you think they should stay up? Like it's a name.
Yeah. I mean,
This one's
it's just a name.
Yeah.
Well, to me, it's like it's just a name, and you can always include like the previous name and like any sort of like historical context of it. It's so I guess like the way I see it is, it's better to like to tear down any like idolization or iconization of anything Confederate, and put that as a footnote. You know, like this base is now this base after, you know, like 2020. And that's fine. Like literally like the history of the base does not change. And, you know, like I really feel like that's not going to affect anything on a major scale. Like if we're looking at it functionality wise, I don't, and again, you have to like, when, do you know when these bases were these like actual like Confederate bases built during like the Civil War?
No,
Yeah, were they
they're like current
Okay.
U.S. bases that are named after the general.
Okay, right. So, and then I feel like that might even
That's
tie back.
weird.
That might, I'm not sure. That might tie back into like the lost cause though, with Southern socialites,
Yeah.
essentially, you know, propagating a false history. And then even then, it's like totally, you know, like get rid of them. I know that the Marines already have like taken down any like depiction of the Confederate flag in like barracks, offices, everything. So I feel like this step is like not too far from that, or like any like strain of like the imagination, you know, like it's fine. I have no qualms with that at all.
I think
Makes
there's.
sense.
I really don't have a too strong of an opinion on it. I think that like what are the names? Is it like a common name?
It's like
it's like
Fort
Robert
Bragg.
E. Lee.
Fort Bragg is the one that comes to mind. Hall, I think.
Fort Bragg, but those they're just names. It's not like
Yeah, it's usually their last name.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, they were so none of these bases were built during the Confederacy. They were U.S. bases built after the Civil War
Yeah.
that then were named after. I mean, that's weird that they would name it after the enemy's. Like what? I mean, what are you gonna have like a? That's like naming. I don't know. Nope. Maybe
Mussolini base.
Mussolini base. I saw your good catch. Yeah, it's like naming it after like a U.S. Army base after Mussolini. So I don't really see
Okay.
why they did that, but they have already got the name. So I say that one's less important than the statues because it's not really like commemorating someone. It's just they had a name and they came up with it and they're like, okay, that's a U.S. Army base.
Okay, wait, hold on. Quick side topic. Why is okay? So Doug, obviously, like just the short like interaction we just had about me almost saying like Hitler base. Okay, like why can't I say Hitler base, but I can say Mussolini base? I mean, Mussolini promoted fascism. Hitler took like Mussolini's fascism. They're like essentially like the same evil. So
Yeah.
I mean, like what? I
just
mean,
think
yes,
Hitler's
one
like
one didn't
more.
like persecute like Jews, and like one is more poignant and like the like cultural like zeitgeist, but
I don't
I
have
mean,
I don't have a problem with it. I just thought
they're both evils.
I just thought it's funny. Like he
I'm
like
not saying like I think like Mussolini is. I'm not trying to compare them on like levels of evil. I'm just
no,
saying like
yeah,
they're both fascist dictators. You know, like
yeah. But
I
this
feel
will
like
be
I could use them
taken.
interchangeably.
This will be taken out of context,
Right.
and then we're all gonna have our careers ruined in 20
Ah.
years. So
Yeah.
what do you do?
Okay, go on.
Right.
Yeah.
So, moreover, like on the current situation with the protests that are happening, Florida Police Union in Brevard County, which is like the East Coast, like so if you go directly east from Orlando, it's Brevard. They've offered to hire the Buffalo 57. So, have you heard about the Buffalo guy who got pushed by the police officers during the
Right.
protest?
Yeah. That
Yeah.
Yeah,
was.
and yeah,
Right.
the first announcement was essentially that he had fallen, and then Trump is like essentially saying that he cited some OAN article that he was like part of something, which made it an excuse as to why
Yeah,
Antifa.
he's
He said
like
he was part of
he was part of
Antifa.
Antifa. Yes, okay,
but
which
which he isn't.
yeah. Yeah, but like he was politically active, but I don't think a 75-year-old man would go as far as to be a part of Antifa. But
Yeah. No.
essentially,
I think it said he was
the
like a Catholic organizer or something.
something like that. I don't know. But the 57 people in, I think it was like the riot police in Buffalo so the two police officers were fired. So the other 57 thought it was unjust. So they all left the job. So now Brevard County is offering to hire them along with the Atlanta Six, which all six officers were involved in pulling a black couple out of their car.
That one was pretty messed up too.
Yeah, it pretty messed up in Atlanta. So do you think it's like proper for them as a union? It's kind of like instigating more or escalating the turnout right now.
I've actually
Doug,
got
do you want to go
an
first?
opinion. Yeah, I
Okay.
think well the 57, the guy that pushed him, I watched the video pretty recently again, and I noticed that like one of the cops at like after the old guy had gotten pushed down and was like visibly on the ground, like very hurt. He was like bleeding
He was bleeding.
Blood,
from
yeah,
his
blood, yeah.
head, like
It
a
was-
lot. It was a lot of blood. Poor guy, by the way. Wish him a like cat.
I think he's still in the hospital right
Best
now.
recovery. Is he in stable condition? Do we know?
I believe so, yeah.
I hope so. Anyways, I saw like at the end of the video, one of the cops like tries to like help the old guy up.
Another like pushes
And
him
another
out
one
of the
like
way.
kind of like bodies him out of the way. So I mean, I'm sure that maybe like the term bad apples gets thrown around a lot in this sort of situation, but seeing as the other 57 of those police officers stepped down because of one or two people's like misconduct,
Mhm.
I think that's pretty noble. I think they did the right thing, and I think they deserve to have jobs if they. But I also think that like we shouldn't just like, hey, give them jobs. I think we should like this whole thing. We need to have like a restructuring of like how police are formed and how they get trained. I think that like this is a problem that like needs to be worked from the highest levels to the lowest levels. This is you can't just like send police out after this is done in the same form and expect things to get better.
Mhm.
Okay. So wait, Max, did they like quit in support of the two officers that got fired, or did they quit because they like to kind of like protest against the two officers' actions of pushing the guy down? Because
I think they quit over his like what they deemed like unjust suspension.
So they
or
said,
firing.
oh, okay. So they said,
okay.
so
I
they were
totally
in
got it
support
wrong
of the
then.
guys. Yeah, I was gonna say, Doug.
I
Like,
totally-
I'm pretty sure these guys like were in support of the two dudes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Just discredit everything I just said.
Okay, it's okay.
Okay.
So the way I see it is no. Literally,
Yeah,
none
no.
of them should be hired. I think that all of them need to find a new career path. If you're being quite honest with me, because the fact of the matter is that, these two guys, they do a terrible thing, and then 57 people, all part of like this. What was it? The emergency response unit, like for like riots or whatever.
Yeah,
What was it?
yeah.
Okay.
Emergency response team.
All of them, like the entirety of the. It's all of them, right?
The whole
All the
unit,
rest of them.
right? Yeah. How many?
I'm
there was
reading the
57
article
total.
right now, and it's saying they only left the emergency response team, and the other 57
Okay.
are still with the force.
Okay, yeah, so like they just like left that like part of it, but
The
they're still part of
team,
the police force.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Still, I feel like that doesn't change anything. The way I see it is like they're just essentially like validating that guy's actions, and that's terrible. That is
Yeah, there's
literally the worst thing. And I feel like it just kind of like goes to prove people's arguments that there is no good cop, because people's like, you'll have people say like, oh, they're bad apples. And then, but when these bad apples are supported and validated by police officers that are like coming out in support of them, like that just makes all of them bad apples. And like this is a clear, like very recent, very real representation of that. And it's doing no favors for the police force like police forces in America as a whole. It's sad, and I think it's actually like disgusting and astonishing that they even considered that. The fact that they can't even bring themselves to like ridicule these two officers that did something terrible is disgusting. And the police union should not have lended out hand. Not to them, not to the 6 people who like tased that couple.
Yeah.
I think it's disgusting. And I don't even know why they would want to do that. Like, I feel that is like the exact opposite thing of what you should do.
Yeah.
Because you're telling America that this is okay. You're telling America that we can just go and shove people on the ground and not take responsibility for it. You're telling America that you're 100% willing to use force against somebody who is completely like harmless.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what was he gonna do?
Nothing. It's
Nothing.
Like this guy in his 70s. Yeah.
It's disgusting. I'm sorry. I have to give it PG-13.
I was gonna say like one bad apple spoils the bunch oftentimes. And do we know the situation, like why those people were pulled over? Is it because of they were out past curfew, something like that?
I'm not here. Let me look into that. So I went.
Because it looked like it was almost.
I think there was
certainly
something that
excessive
led
force.
to the action, but it was excessive force for what had happened.
Yeah. Okay. Because definitely that older dude did not
It's
deserve
because
that.
they were out past curfew.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean you send
Excessive
them home with
force.
maybe with like a
Excessive, yeah.
you send them home with like what's
A
it,
warning.
a ticket or a warning, or maybe they've got to appear in court or something, like a court date. But they
Not
pulled,
even a court date. Like,
yeah, like maybe civil, maybe like they get like community service or something. That would be extreme. If someone gave them community service for being out past that,
yeah.
that would be extreme. And then
Right.
these police officers tased them and dragged them out of the car, and they messed that one guy's window up. That's probably gonna be expensive.
Mhm.
So, I don't see the use in that. And I also want to apologize for like misidentifying what was happening earlier. I want to be very clear. I did misunderstand that. I was not
Mhm.
like condoning those officers.
Yeah. No.
I do think it's really-
this separate article about the 57 said that they had resigned not out of solidarity, but they felt there was a lack of legal protection. Like if a similar thing had happened to them, they would lose their jobs.
What? No,
So
that's
that's-
even
so that's-
worse.
I don't know
That's
if
what the
that's
two
true.
That's even
officers
worse.
are claiming. It does sound like it, yeah.
No, okay, because isn't there like there's a big push for oh god, was it? It's like the immunity, like the immunity bill that would essentially give officers like immunity from like any like legal action against them for like a lot of their actions. There's a
Well,
big
that's already
push.
in effect right now.
Is it okay? Literally, like we're trying to like dismantle that, and then
Yeah.
they're like saying it's not. We're
It's
like
kind
we
of
don't have
ironic.
enough legal protection, but
Yeah.
like historically, like they have.
Hmm.
And that's even more baffling. I think,
Yeah, it's very strange to think about.
yeah. And I have like a big bone to pick with like these police unions because I remember like the mayor of like LA, he kind of said like I'm gonna do a 105 million or 150 million dollar cut to like the LAPD's budget. And the police union made a press statement right after it saying we're concerned for the mayor of LA's mental health. Like for everybody in the world to see.
That's
I-
like one of those funny police tweets, like with the tweet like,
Yeah,
"There's
yeah,
an accident. Shimmy on down past 41 or whatever the hell."
yeah.
So, mhm.
No.
So
no,
yeah,
no,
going back to the Buffalo. So the article, the quote says that we quit because our union said that they aren't legally backing us anymore. So why would we stand on a line for the city with no legal backing if something were to happen? Has nothing to do with us supporting, said a second officer. So it's kind of like cringe. That is
Are they
not an act of
saying?
solidarity.
Are they saying that they're afraid they might have
So
legal
like,
action
okay,
against them for the
yeah.
other
So
two's
essentially,
actions?
like qualified immunity and like there's
Yeah.
purposely vague language in the contracts that the
Mhm,
union
mhm.
negotiates with the police office. So if the union is no longer like backing the contract terms, then they have like no defendant in that case, and they would be like left hanging in a sense.
I guess
So,
I guess I like sort of see it.
like
If
for the
it's
small
like-
chance that something wrong happens, if you're a riot officer, like you wouldn't want to be in that scenario. So they
Right.
didn't want the role.
So like,
Yes.
let me get this straight. Are they arguing that they're leaving because they're afraid that like the actions of those two guys will get them in trouble? Even though
In
they
a
did-
sense, yes.
I
It
guess that
says
makes
if something were to happen.
sense.
that makes okay, yeah.
Makes
I guess
some sense.
that makes more sense now.
Mhm.
But like, I mean,
There's a lot of police protection, and it still kind of in a way condones the officers' actions, which they
Mhm.
I would hope they wouldn't, personally or like in a professional stance.
Yeah.
That was super wrong, and by anyone, by a police officer, by like a normal person. If Jesus Christ came back from the dead and then pushed that old guy, that would be messed up. It doesn't matter who you are. That was like a
Yeah.
severely, incredibly wrong thing to do.
right. I guess it makes more sense because like I can definitely see why you wouldn't want to get into legal trouble for like something your colleague did. But I feel that I mean, so I guess I kind of understand that now. But they kind of have to like double down on the fact that this is not out of solidarity. Like they're gonna have to make it really clear. And I think that the union offering a handout to hire them is still not cool because they just resigned from the riot team. They're
Yeah.
still officers. They can still find employment. I mean, from like just the experience with like my dad, he's part of the SWAT team, but he's still part of like the force. And, like he can resign from the SWAT team and still be part of the force. Like it's not
Mhm.
one or the other. So they're not out of jobs by any sense of the mean. And
Mhm.
I don't know. I guess it's like a bit more acceptable if it's just like out of legal concerns because like your contract is falling through. Like if it's a bit more comprehensible just because it's like a contractual concern. But again, like the way it's been portrayed recently, it's being portrayed as an act of like solidarity. So
Yeah, my understanding is the union said it was an act of solidarity, but the people
Really?
involved. Yeah, that's what the union said. But the
Wow.
people said it was because of the union not backing them that they resigned. So it's like a he said, she said scenario.
Right, and we don't know who to believe.
Yeah.
We'll have to see if any information comes out on that. Maybe you can
Yeah.
follow up
Mhm.
on like a future
Either
episode.
way, I don't like the unions and how they're
Yeah,
acting
I
right
would
now.
agree.
They're
Yeah.
being very, very hostile to like literally like the whisper of budget cuts.
Hmm.
And I'm really happy that so many people are talking about like diverting funds. I think that's an awesome next step. I've I made like several like posts online just about talking about how like I think autonomous communities and community organization and more funding going to like communities to like sort of like bring them from the ground up is the way to go in the future. Um, and I'm glad that's getting like recognition.
As a follow-up, do you think there is a future where we don't have police?
Um, the short of it, yes.
Really?
The long of it, it's gonna be long. So the like for one, it's like this is like America. Like nothing is going to change quickly, ever.
Mhm.
Nothing will. I mean, literally the way like laws are, it's like everything is in gridlock constantly 24/7, and I feel like that's a byproduct of direct democracy, which like leads to huge dysfunction and like the change and adaptation of it, and that's kind of the reality of it. But if you're asking me like, is it just a possible hypothetical, like could we do it and could it work? Yeah, I agree. Like I believe a lot of people will just look at this argument for autonomous communities, for heightened community resources, for like better like drug education programs, like the decriminalization of all drugs, things like that, and say no, it won't work because like police aren't there, and they'll like justify it by saying like there will always be bad people, there will always be like malice and hate and anger, and I really feel that like that's such a like primal like argument of like is man inherently evil.
Mhm.
And I feel like your position on can we function without cops is is going to be the same as your take of is man inherently evil. If you believe man
Mhm.
is
Yeah.
inherently,
Yeah. It is. Yeah.
you feel that we're going to need cops. If you feel that man gains evil through like experiences in life and like things like that, then you might believe that we'll be able to function without cops. I lean towards the latter. I honestly feel like heightened like community resources will be like should be the future.
Mhm.
If it can lead to like the like dismantling of police, I'm kind of down for that. I know Minneapolis, like they're like trying to do it, right?
Mhm. The city council did pass it, but I think it has
Right.
to get through some more hoops.
Of course, yeah. It's not gonna happen immediately. It's not like they're gonna immediately dissolve. I'm interested to see how that goes. I hope.
Mhm.
Part of me feels like it's not gonna go well, and then
Yeah.
the media will lambast it, politicians will lambast it.
Yeah.
The idea will be put to rest, and I feel like that's. I'm really afraid that that will happen because there are so many resources talking about how autonomous communities and like focusing on like a very like micro level of people like in America like literally like blocks and like forming relations and like support nets and things like that like among these like small groups of people in America. There's a lot of resources that are good, but most Americans will just write it off as it won't work. Like just because it doesn't fit into like how America functions now. It's so different. And a lot of people will just like they'll point to the fact that like when slavery when slavery was like propositioned to be abolished, people said like, oh, it's an inherent thing, like like we can't get rid of it, it's always gonna be here. Like, isn't it better that way? And they couldn't even like fathom a world where we didn't have like slavery. And same thing happens with like the civil rights movements. Like, shouldn't we have like separate but equal? Like I don't think we can get rid of it. Isn't it better that way? And then I feel like this is another one of those moments. I totally agree that we need to like eventually like dismantle the police. I feel like there should be a push for that at least. And another thing to like consider is the fact that like police are being like spread out over like so many like roles in communities too. Like,
Yeah,
and you'll
I
hear
agree.
you'll hear like police chiefs or like sheriffs or whatever like talk about this. I mean, there's a statement from like a guy in Dallas. He was like, "We have a dog problem in Dallas, and we have to send police officers running after these dogs all the time, and like taking care of that." It's like, well, like what the
Shouldn't
hell
be
is?
their job.
Yeah, it's not. It shouldn't be their job. Like
Mhm.
it, and in that same vein, it should not be their job to essentially like crack down on like drug overdoses and stuff like that. I
Mhm.
honestly I feel like the the very first big step and leading to police dismantleization is undoing literally every single thing that happened in America during the war on drugs. Or
Mhm.
that's still going on, I guess, but the war on drugs sucks,
Yeah.
and you have to do all of it.
Yeah, it doesn't
Okay.
work.
Doug,
I don't know about fully dismantling police. I think that there's almost always going to be an inherent need for at least some sort of community protection in some form. Whether that takes the role of police or military or maybe some form of vigilantism in the future, who knows? But I think that there is definitely every community needs at least some form of insurance that um, horrors can't just be committed without some kind of retribution. That
Mhm.
said, I think that the current police administration is bloated. I think that it doesn't work as it should. I think that we need to divert a lot of funds um, towards preventative measures instead of
Mhm.
attacking at the causes. We need to. This is a many. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. This is a many-headed beast, and you can't fight a many-headed beast on one offensive. You've got to attack everything at once, or you kill one head, and two more will take its place.
Yeah.
You need to, have like JD said, the war on drugs needs to be, stopped. Needs to be stopped. You can't have the war on drugs. I think maybe just take some notes from Portugal. They've got
yes,
almost every single drug there legalized, and they've got relief programs for people who are addicted, and it's done wonders over there.
Mhm.
I think police should be more intertwined with the community instead of being sent out as in this antagonistic role. They should be there to help people. And I think we should move towards what kind of what JD said, which is dismantling the police. But we need to move to a place where they are more woven into the community than kind of like a separate thing that watches over the community and makes sure it's like, are you guys behaving? You like watching and behaving. Um, it needs to be like feel like part of the community. They need to be like people they need to be closer to home, and they need to be there to protect us, not to keep us scared.
Mhm.
I feel
I
like
think. Yeah.
yeah, no, go.
I was just thinking, like, in a sense, psychologically, as long as humans are driven by incentives, there's always going to be an incentive for crime because there is like a net positive for people. So as long as there's like that net positive, even psychologically, like we may deem like, oh, I'd go to jail, which is a net negative. People still weigh that with the material gain that they might get from committing a crime. So as long as that's like psychologically the case, I don't see a world where police are fully dismantled.
The way I see it is there is like an incentive for crime, but only if needs aren't met, and that's where most crime comes from. Of course, like that's not
Mm-hmm.
all crime. When you have like heists of fucking like paintings, things like that, like that's obviously not of like an unfulfillment of needs. Um, I honestly feel like the crime rate could be like reduced dramatically, like even like exponentially, if we put extremely heavy preventative measures into place that work to fulfill the needs of people, like based off of like I'd say like Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah,
Because
I
if
was
you
just
have a,
thinking that.
yeah, literally Maslow's hierarchy of needs is so like useful to know for like
Mhm.
any sort of like debate on anything, like, or relating to like human relations. Like it's my favorite thing. But basically, I feel that if you can like if you can have like community infrastructure funded by the government to help fulfill these needs, you're going to
Mhm.
reduce crime rate a lot. And I feel like if we dismantle police, I feel like the only sort of people that are hired by the government to tote around guns are people who are brought into like the hairiest of situations. People should not be like, we should not have authorities toting around guns in neighborhoods and parks and things like that, you know. And another point is like, well, people would say like, how are you going to get like people who can subdue like these, you know, like shooters in there like super quickly? Like obviously only police can do that. And like to that I raise like, well, I mean, like self-defense, dude, come on. Like I
Mhm.
feel people
Jiu-jitsu, bro. That's what I'm saying. We have this conversation all the time. He always gets me so mad when I bring it up.
okay okay
It was part of Andrew Yang's platform to actually like require all police officers to be a purple belt jujitsu.
really?
That's awesome. No,
It
that's
was.
really
It
awesome.
was. It was.
That's super
Yeah.
important.
That's
Like
I
no one
mean,
talks about it, but
you
it's
get
real.
that. Yeah, I've never.
Yeah.
No, I mean that
That's
makes
cool.
sense.
That's cool. Yeah.
I'm sure. And does he does martial arts?
No,
doesn't he?
I don't think he does. I don't think
Oh,
so.
he himself doesn't.
That's interesting. I like
Yeah.
that. I mean, but what I mean is like, you know, like personal firearms. And the thing is, people boil down the issue of, you know, like gun control and firearms to like, if you hate it, it's a leftist thing. If you support it, it's a right wing thing. But literally, like things like the Socialist Rifle Union exist. You know, like this. I'm not even kidding. Like, you look it up right now. I mean, they have like a bunch of manuals, like theory education. I mean, they have like the Communist Manifesto on there and anarcho-syndicalism
That's
and the
funny.
ABCs of education on there. Theory education. But like, what I'm saying is like, I believe current modern American politics have led us to believe that, like, you know, the need for like, well, not the need, but like some sort of like implementation of self-defense via like firearms is not a bipartisan thing, or it will never be a bipartisan thing. There will always be like lefties who will hate it and like righties who will support it. But I feel that if we want to move towards police dismantling, personal protection through firearms has to be considered. And
Mhm.
I mean, like, how can we blame them? If you decide one day to, I don't know, pull a Unabomber and try and send a package, or no, well, actually, Unabomber wouldn't work in this case. But let's say like you want to try and like blow up a residential
hospital.
area,
Okay.
hospital. There you go. Okay. In a world where there's no police, obviously, like something has to happen. Why can't it just be brought upon the people to like try and subdue that through extensive training and stuff like that? I mean, I know like there's a lot of people who will just like be totally against that, but honestly, I don't see why like the promotion of like self-defense through firearms cannot exist in like progressive ideology. I think that's rubbish. I think that people like, I mean, obviously like the debate for gun control now versus this hypothetical of like police dismantlation, it's a bit different, you know. But what I mean is like, at least consider the idea of how this can be implemented, of how, you know, like being able to like safely use firearms effectively and being taught by that through government infrastructure, through like community outreach, like things like that to protect yourself in scenarios is a vital resource, even without police being dismantled, you know. Still, like
Yeah.
it's a bit touch and go like throughout the United States. Like I'd argue that like the way we have it right now, like the stand your ground law is like so divisive and kind of insane. But if we're moving toward the dismantling of police, we have to step up personal protection and giving the public training on firearms. I feel like if we're like moving away from one, we have to move towards the other. if we
Mhm.
want to make it work. Now, I'm not saying like the government today should be like, let's give everybody a gun and teach them how to use it with the police still being here. I feel like that would just result in like nothing good.
I mean, that's how it is in like Switzerland to an extent.
Right. But
Is it
if
really?
is
That's
it?
really
Yeah,
surprising.
there's like rifles in almost everyone's homes. Like there are gun
That's
ownership
very.
rifles, US.
That's
I
cool.
mean, one side of me wants to disagree with JD and say that that would cause chaos, but then like the other side of me says, I mean, look at Texas. People are really polite over there, and it's for a reason.
Well, I mean, I feel like I feel like it shouldn't it shouldn't be a thing where like the government gives guns themselves to everybody. It's like it should
No.
just be like in a society where police don't exist. It should be up to you. Do you want to have a gun for personal protection in a world where no police exist? And do you want to be able to learn that? Do you want to be able to like go through this extensive training on it, the extensive screenings, things like that for your safety? And a lot of people are going to want to say yeah. And I think that's fine. I
I
think
think
that there has to be a lot of precautions that come with that, like 20 billion.
exactly. Yeah. Like a
Like
lot of precautions, and I think it would be really important to have like small scale tests before to like see if it would work. I think a lot of this stuff that we say is like there are good ideas here that we have, but what it boils down to is we need like to know if these things are going to work. Like if they
Right.
do, then go ahead, we'll do them. But if they don't, it's probably better to put them on an experimental scale instead of just like immediately pushing them out to every single state.
Hmm.
The way I see it too is like this kind of collides into this whole idea of like increased funding for like social workers and like or just like social resources in communities as well. Like if you have like your basic if you have your needs no yeah if you have your needs met, then why are you going to use your gun that you learned through the government to commit a crime? You're going to use it to protect you, and that's because like you don't need to go out and like shoot people. You're not going to like have that need if there is a lot of like social support in your community that is funded through the government, you know. So I feel like that's kind of like a passive preventive measure there. I mean, yeah, like I guess like I agree with like the dismantling police, and I feel like that like with that comes personal ownership of or like extensive training on personal ownership of firearms to the masses of America. You know?
I think we should do the jujitsu thing. I'm like,
Dude, yeah, that that
I
sounds
like it.
that's
badass.
so awesome. No,
Yeah.
like really, and
Okay,
it's
we
super
dismantle
valid
the
too.
cops. We teach everybody jujitsu.
Yeah, everyone's
I'm-
just choking each other out
Yeah.
all the time. That'd be funny.
Yeah,
No, I
they'll-
actually
if
think
the-
like the police being taught jujitsu is like a really like cool idea. Maybe not jujitsu, but
they
going
would
through
get rid
some
of the
sort
fat
of
cops.
donut cups. No, because as someone who's like done martial arts for like a large majority of my life, it's not all about as a lot of people know, it's not all about like kicking someone's ass. It's not really what it's about. The main goal is to learn discipline, self-restraint, and then apply your skills if you really need to. It's most of what you learn there is about really self-restraint and like trying to find like a place in yourself where you'd rather solve something peacefully than what you would have to do if it got violent.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I think that'd be cool for police if they, went through maybe not martial arts, but like a program that taught them the same sort of core values, where it's better to diffuse the situation than to try and put like an abrupt stop to things. It usually doesn't work. And, we've been seeing like a lot of, you see a lot of body cam footage of like of police officers that like take matters like that into their own hands. The other day I saw body cam footage of a police officer who pulled a gun on some guy in his driveway because the guy blew through a stop sign, which is ludicrous. Like that is the exact opposite type of behavior that you're taught to learn in like most martial arts settings. And if we'd had like a similar sort of thing for law enforcement, I think that would be, that would do a lot of there would be a lot of benefits.
Yeah, but the way I see it is like if you teach all cops jujitsu, that will not stop the planting of crack on people.
Yeah.
You know,
You do
like
like a
war on
stranglehold when
drug
someone tries to put
policies.
crack on you.
Put he sneaks it into
Something
your
like
back
a
pocket.
tie
You have
choke, yeah.
crack.
I
But
think
like,
just to
yeah,
interject, I think a big like fault with like the figure that like only 8 unarmed black men died, or black people rather died, like in 2018, is the fact that like there's body cam footage of cops like throwing guns on the ground. That's like police issue, and saying like he was armed, so they have no like repercussions on them.
yeah,
Huh. Is that really? That's
Yeah,
crazy.
I've
That
seen
seems
videos of it. Yeah.
yeah, and you
uh,
know, like you can teach them jujitsu, or I feel like teaching jujitsu that's cool, and like that's a really interesting take on it that I feel like is much more valid than a lot of
Mhm.
people might say. Like Doug agrees with it, and I agree with it too.
yeah.
But I feel like the root of the whole problem is just the fact that they have guns. You know, like there's a huge sense of power that comes with the fact that you can just carry like a Glock on you on your job
Or worse.
and use it to assert power over random people, you
Mhm.
know, and in situations that are completely stupid and don't warrant it, like blowing through a stop sign. Like what the hell? There's no need for that. There isn't, and I feel like a step towards like a better future and in the short term, I'd say, is like trying to push for at least not having it on them all the time, like or like
Mhm.
that, like you just cannot keep it
Mall
holstered on you.
cop.
Yeah. Like what? Mall cop?
Mall cop.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Like if you want to say that, totally. Just keep it in the cruiser, things like
And a
that.
trank gun. Put trank
Like
darts in there.
please. Trank darts? No. No, that's still the same. Like that's still the same issue. Like
No,
if you're
it's gonna go to sleep.
yeah, yeah, okay. Like, hey, dude, I have a yeah, but you could say like I have a trank dart. I'll trank you. You know, like you could totally threaten somebody with that. Like
Yeah, I did. I'm
if you
joking.
get tranked and you hit your head, like
Yeah, I mean, it's still pretty bad. I mean,
yeah, of
I'd rather that than getting shot.
course.
But, you know.
I mean, like, it's so multifaceted. It's like, and it's like once you start thinking about like the problem of systemic racism in policing, it then branches off into systemic racism in the way drugs are treated in America and the war on crime, and like the war on drugs, not the war on crime, which you know like then leads into like so many other issues. You know, like systemic racism on like the community level, with like education, you know, so like we have comps in schools to essentially bust young kids with drugs to essentially send them to like prison. It's like the
Right.
people talk about like the school to prison pipeline, like that's real. It is very real, and it
And it
kind of
doesn't
like
work either. Like, it does not
it
stop
doesn't.
people at all. No.
It's like this rat's king.
As we all know.
It's like this this rat's nest of like systemic racism. Like you know that just there's no center towards it. It's all like equally like dependent on each other to make like this house of cards that you know everything relies on its like every single part of it relies on the other to like essentially function, and if you dismantle one that doesn't completely like get rid of everything else. Well, a house of cards is a bad analogy, but like what I mean is like it's like once you really think about it, it is embedded everywhere. I mean like I can't imagine people who think that like systemic racism in America doesn't exist. If you don't realize that, then I I feel like you're part of the problem. Um, I guess another thing I'm passionate about is the legalization of all drugs. I know that sounds like really like stupid. It's like, oh well, you know, yeah, you just want to have fun, but like really, it isn't because the way America is set up now, it's that you have drugs on you, you go to prison. You know, like what is that going to teach you about not
Nothing.
abusing drugs? Nothing. No, Doug is right. Like Portugal did it good.
Yeah, they put up these hospitals that would not that had a very incredibly comprehensive um, treatment plans for any and all drug abuse cases. They would help addicts get back on their feet. You could look into it. They would actually like help people get off drugs by like giving them a healthy supply that's not laced with shit that's going to kill them. Portugal their drug rehabilitation program has been a massive success on a countrywide scale, and I think we need to follow suit and do what they did. I think that would
Right.
cause a lot of positive change in the communities. And this is coming from someone who does no drugs. I don't do anything like at all.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. And another thing is like the scheduling system, like why is marijuana still in class 1, like, or
Doesn't
schedule
make
1?
sense.
It doesn't make sense. Schedule 1 is essentially saying it's all recreational. There's no medical use. And
It's as bad as heroin.
right. So just need to abolish like the scheduling system, because drugs will automatically be like thrown into schedules, like especially schedule 1 and things like that, without having any like forethought of like what they could be used for down the line. I mean, ketamine is being used to treat like cases of like major depressive disorder that many antidepressants could never crack.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
just
And
saw a story about it like a couple days ago. You go ahead, but I'll get back to it.
no, I'm just saying like there's like so many uses for drugs that you like might not even think of. Um, I'm like, of course, there's always going to be like dangers associated with them, but the way I see it is like drugs never really like killed anybody. It just kind of comes down to like one, other like things mix into the drug that killed you, or two, misuse of it on your part. You know, like
Yeah.
a lot of these drugs, they like hold a lot of like medical potential and beneficial value, yet the scheduler system essentially keeps like research of them back 100 years. And
Exactly. Yeah, we'd be
it's sad.
way further along if we could
Yeah,
if like
honestly.
this stuff was legally allowed. And also I think criminalizing drugs would help. That would just debunk almost all of the drug cartel operations. If that was like cut off, then what's to say that like maybe this helps our neighboring country of Mexico? Like, who knows?
Hmm.
This could be beneficial not just to us as Americans. I know we often try to think of ourselves as Americans and everyone else is everyone else, and sometimes we include Canadians once in a while. But honestly, we need to look at solutions that help not just us, but people around the entire world.
Yeah. So going off what I was saying earlier, another person like kind of like related to like what I was saying about like how like there's like almost always a use for like a lot of drugs, um, medical use. It's not just always like recreational. Is like Hamilton Morris. He's like a psychonaut, which essentially is a person who just explores like altered states of consciousness. But he has like a lot of like great like ideas and like conversations with people about how you know the like drug scheduling system is just terrible for any like medical advancements with these drugs, because they automatically just get thrown into schedules without any forethought, um, and they're essentially just like left there to rot. I'm trying to think, like there's a lot of drugs in schedule 1 that are put there that are like opiate derivatives and are much safer than the opioids that many Americans are being like currently like prescribed, and could be used to like get them off of these opioids, yet they're stuck in schedule 1 and cannot be used at all. Like they're like these, if used properly, they could be healthy alternatives, or like midways to essentially have people stop opioid abuse. But because it's just a drug and people could use it recreationally, it has now been scheduled by the US government, and there's literally no use for it. Like, and I think like another like like proof of like this idea that a lot of like seemingly like recreational only drugs have like medical benefit is like meth, of all things. um Amphetamines are scheduled in class 2, which is right under class 1, and it's because they're used for treating ADHD, right? And Yeah. Yeah. I have. Yeah. So
Wait, yo,
I have-
ADHD gang, fuck
Yeah.
yeah.
I have,
Oh, there's
my
our there's
body is
one.
my body is riddled with amphetamines.
I
But the
haven't
thing is,
taken
like,
it.
I think it's like one carbon molecule away from meth. But
Mhm.
Yeah,
when
I know.
people say,
Vyvanse is pretty close,
yeah,
right?
because it's amphetamines and meth is
Yeah.
methamphetamine. So, but the thing is, like, you have to think about the other way. Like, meth is one carbon molecule away from amphetamines. There's like there could be a lot of like potential use for that in like microdosing that people could have never considered. Like they're very similar. And I remember like Hamilton Morris, like literally he said like I have like tried both and they're very similar.
JD, you should try both and get back to us.
No, 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 no. The thing is though, a lot of like meth and something that can be dirty.
Yeah,
It
of
could
course.
have impurities in it that will kill you.
Yeah.
And
Like
that's
codeine, right?
and because of that,
Mhm.
journalists make shock stories on it, and those shock stories turn into people just like having this taboo superstition around this drug, and it's sad because then it gets put on Schedule 1, and then we can never research it.
Exactly.
Mhm.
I think we
So-
need to just do away with the whole scheduling thing. Like I said, I'm totally for just decriminalization down the line. A lot of places have said that we have to do experiments first, like
No,
getting rid of the police. Yeah, experiment first. Self-regulated communities. You have to like with guns, with like less gun control. Got to do experiments because we don't know what would happen. But Portugal
drugs.
has been an experiment
Right.
for us. We literally saw they are doing great. I was there like a couple years ago. It was awesome. I had so much fun. Like,
Yeah, he did so much meth.
yeah, I did. It was like, yeah, it was awesome. I was only there for a couple days, so no, I didn't get into that.
Oh,
But no, it was. This is something that if we started doing it right now, I don't think there would be any sort of negative cause, unless I'm sure there'd be some negatives in the short run that we would iron out at some point. There's always hiccups in these sort of big changes, but
Mhm.
I think we should really just get on track to doing this and like do it.
Yeah. Max, what do you think?
I would tend to agree. I think the scheduling system is a little bit redundant because it came to mind in the early 20th century when a lot of like the things were on a profit driven basis by like big pharma in essence, but like these people who are in the administration at the time, I forget which presidential administration it was, and they were the ones calling the shots. And essentially like the biggest example is marijuana being Schedule 1. It just doesn't make sense in comparison to the other scheduling systems.
Mhm.
So insofar as it restricts research, I just don't see it as an effective way at like reducing crime or use in any sense, because like there's always going to be a demand for drugs. It just depends on if you do it illicitly or legally, which in most cases illicitly will cause more harm.
Well, the way I see it is if you get rid of the scheduling system, you can get rid of the stigma surrounding drugs, which
Mhm.
then like turns it into like not being like this terrible like, like crime ridden thing, and you can do it safely, and
Mhm.
if the government like can help you like ensure that like whatever you're using is pure, like that's a big bonus. And like I think that getting rid of the scheduler system, like in combination with decriminalizing like drug use, is like they have to go together. Obviously, like if you get rid of like the justice scheduling system, I think that it's gonna like destigmatize a lot of things and like lead to like research, but obviously it's not going to like put down any like crime rates because like drugs are still like illegal. But obviously, I think that they have to go hand in hand. I totally support for like decriminalizing drug use. It has to be like you cannot just go to prison. It has to be like reform and rehab. You should only go to prison if you're dealing it like illegally. Like if you are like selling like meth to like kids in middle school, like yeah, go to jail, dude.
That's
You know,
that's like child endangerment. I don't
Yeah.
even think you would be
I'm not saying
like
when
charged as a drug user or a drugs thing. That's just child endangerment, dude.
right, totally. So
Yeah.
I mean, the way I see it is like if you're using drugs, it doesn't reflect you as like a bad person. There's like so many like social circumstances that like can like lead up to that, and I feel like it should be like normalized in a lot of ways. But
Yeah.
Another thing I want to talk about, Max. Do you know what the Mulford Act is?
No, what is it?
Okay.
I actually
Basically,
don't know either.
and this is kind of like tying back into like what I was talking about earlier with the idea that personal like protection via like firearms should like not be like a divisive thing amongst party lines. Basically, the Mulford Act was, I guess, like I'm kind of like bringing it up because what I was saying earlier, it might have sounded like I totally support the NRA, but like I hate the NRA like a lot, like more than anything. Like they're the worst
Mhm.
lobbyist group, and the reason why, in a big part of it, why is because of the Mulford Act, which essentially Nixon worked, or was it Nixon or Reagan?
I think it was Reagan.
It was Reagan. So Reagan worked with the NRA to essentially pass an act that would essentially allow for black people not to open carry, because they started to do that in response to like increased like police presence in their areas to like crack down for drugs. So like Reagan essentially like starts like the war on like drugs and stuff like that. There's a heightened police presence, essentially just like actively like seeking out like drugs on people. And black communities start being like, well, this isn't safe, so we'll open carry. And then Reagan literally responds to that by working with the NRA themselves to have black communities like not open carry.
Was
And
it
I
just black communities?
it was targeted. It was targeted.
I'm sure it would be other like maybe.
They
I think
didn't
it'd be
say
low income.
it's not like the act like literally explicitly said black people cannot open carry,
Yeah.
but it was targeted essentially towards
Yeah, like,
these communities that started to like
Jim Crow
want
laws.
to like you know be safe. And
It's like a poll tax.
yeah,
It's
essentially.
not like actually. It's not like don't
I
let
had to
black
bring it
people
up.
vote. But
I want to know
to
that
discriminate them.
it was California.
Mhm.
So it was in California specifically, and it basically said you can't like no public carrying of loaded firearms. And what am I saying?
Nixon.
Reagan. Yeah, Nixon x Reagan. Reagan and the NRA worked together to pass it, and both parties agreed to it.
I think it was part of like more of like a systemic racist
It
thing
is.
at the time though.
No. I'm just saying, like, what I mean is, like, I guess I kind of want to elaborate on like the fact that like they're like we can't just say like give everybody guns and like call it a day. We need to make sure that like things like the NRA won't be able to like infringe upon like rights like these, like stuff like that. We need to like, so if we're gonna get rid of cops, then we need to have heightened like levels of like personal protection like through firearms, which then in turn leads to making sure groups like like the NRA and the president, I guess, can't take those rights away.
So weird to say.
I know, because it's like there's like so many steps to it,
Yeah.
And I feel like it's like totally like a systemic racism thing. Like it's literally proof that like systemic racism exists in America. Like it is blatantly obvious. I mean, it's written on the wall, like with this act. But God, I'm so tired. What I mean is,
You're doing great. Keep it up.
thank you. I'm saying is like if we want to have heightened personal protection, we need to get rid of groups like the NRA in American politics. I mean, there's so many other reasons why like the NRA just needs to get out of American politics, but acts like these, I believe, is a big reason why, especially now more than anything.
Yeah. Do you think repealing Citizens United is like the best way to get like lobbyist groups like the NRA out?
I really don't know what citizens.
Yeah, like I would need to know
I need an
more about like
So
what that, like,
during
what happened with that.
Obama's first term, it was a 5-4 Supreme Court decision that upheld that companies have the same rights as humans and they can like donate
Oh.
unlimited amounts of money to like political organizations.
That
Yeah.
is such a
Repeal that.
misleading name.
Repeal that.
Yeah, but
Two.
the issue is, since it's Supreme Court precedent, you need a constitutional amendment. to repeal it.
Yeah.
And like that's the reason why I feel like there's so much dysfunction in like representative democracy, you know, like
Mhm.
especially America's like right now, you know, it's like things can be enacted and then just never taken away if society deems it not good.
Mhm.
And that's that, you know, it's
it
terrible.
limits experimentation because they're like I
Absolutely.
keep coming back to this. Like this is maybe the third or fourth time, but experimentation is super important in this sort of thing. You can't just do things and then like hope that they work. You have to do things on smaller scales, and then if something doesn't work at a higher scale, you got to like take that back. If it doesn't work, it has to be able to be taken back. Maybe not incredibly easily, but definitely more so than we have right now.
Yeah, repeal that though. Companies definitely do not have the same rights as citizens. That's just sad.
I'll say it again.
Yeah,
It's
Terrible.
like an
Disgusting.
incredibly
it.
misleading name.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, like
Not even
Citizens
about-
United was the name of the political action committee that sued the FCC.
Okay, that makes sense.
Still
I don't know.
misleading.
Still seems misleading. Just the same thing as like the Earn It Act. That's a whole
No.
that's a
Don't earn
whole
it.
that's so bad. I hope that gets
Yeah.
repealed.
I wanted to pivot back to the marijuana being Schedule 1. So Ron DeSantis actually passed a bill last year in March that legalized smoking marijuana, like medical marijuana, because
Mhm.
previously like medical marijuana was legal under Rick Scott, but you couldn't smoke it. So do you see like a future for Florida in like, let's say the next 5 years where recreational marijuana is legal?
This is a weird situation that we have in Florida because like the pain pill companies are really big here. So we've got like harsher like laws on a lot of like marijuana in some places, but then other times you've got like opioids are like less regulated under certain scenarios. It's very
Mhm.
weird. I really don't know if I have like enough expertise in like the legalities of like drugs, like Schedule 1 versus Schedule 2, marijuana versus opioids, all that stuff to like say anything. But I think it like we've all been pretty expressly in favor of decriminalization and recreational use in some form.
Right. I totally like see a future, and I'll advocate for a future that like has recreational marijuana use in Florida. I think that's like another step towards, you know, the decriminalization of all drugs. And
It'll take our minds off climate change too.
yeah, that too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Douglas. The thing I kind of hate though is the fact that, you know, big suits have to essentially advocate for these changes. They have to
Mhm.
say, they have to come into the government and say like, look, if we legalize weed, we can bring in a lot of business and like things like that, and like make it an economically justifiable position to the government for it to happen at all. And like the people who will be like proposing these things and like, you know, like speaking for it in the government literally will not have touched a drug in their life. They're just doing it because it's business. And the government won't listen to any like explanations as to why we should do it that are like based in, you know, like social circumstances, or, you know, like literally every other reason why it should be legal. They'll only listen to like the economic side of it, you know.
Money talks.
Yeah, like if I can make
That's true.
if I can come up to Florida and be like, look, this is why we need to make, you know, like PCP like recreational legal, and I give like a great like, you know, slideshow on how we can bring in so much money from selling PCP to people on the streets, you know, in shops and stuff like that, and like they'll eat it up, you know, like they'll definitely like pursue it. And
You just gotta call it a different name. Something fun.
Angel dust.
Like
Or
Mad Sugar or something. I
something,
don't know.
no, something surrounding like horses, like because it's a horse
Trank.
tranquilizer. Trank.
No. Horse foot. I don't know.
Horse foot? Yeah, bro. Let me.
Fairy dust. Unicorn dust. Unicorn dust.
Unicorn dust. Okay.
Or like unicorn snot if you like make it like a gummy. I don't know.
Yeah, but like what Doug said, it's terrible that like the pain pills are like less regulated than marijuana. Or
In some spots, yeah. It's
Yeah.
really it's a super weird situation here in Florida.
Yeah, you had like people like taking Greyhound buses down to Florida to be prescribed opioids, like 30-day
No.
supplies, and they didn't. Yeah, no, it's true, out of state, and there was no centralized record for these prescriptions, so they would just
Yep.
write the script. You would go off, and you could go to another doctor and get another 30-day prescription of opioids.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really crazy.
The opioid epidemic is
It's
it's heartbreaking. I
Yeah.
mean, and like I said
Dude,
earlier, a lot of sta-
legalize it. Decriminalize. Again.
Well,
come
and the
back
thing is
to
like the like decriminalization and like abolishment, like the scheduling system that allows for like opiate derivatives that are much safer than like the opioids we're currently prescribing to these people. It'll allow them to like recover and get off the drug. You know, like obviously if you go from like usually like like taking like opioids every day, you can use these like derivatives to sort of like wean off of it and then get back to life. You know, but it's in Schedule 1, so no, we can't. You know, and it's a big pharma move too. I mean,
Yeah, they don't want the weed industry to be impeding on their sales. you
Well,
know?
no, it's not. It's not even that. It's like if
Well, it might
any.
be.
Well, if like what I'm saying is like if an opiate derivative is brought to market that is much safer than what these like companies are currently selling,
Sure.
I mean that's going to affect their profit margins. You know,
Mhm.
then you
I
have
think-
to go and secure the patents for that, and like
They're
this
trying to
and
lock it
just-
out, yeah.
it's Another hassle for them, and they're just like, no, put it on Schedule 1. Let's not think about it. You know, it's.
Exactly.
I want to say there's a. Okay, so do you know what kratom is?
Mhm.
No.
Okay, basically like it's another drug that was put on, I think I don't know, has it been scheduled? Basically it is it has like opioid properties. It's like this plant, and I believe the FDA scheduled it last year. After it was like legal in the States for a while, but basically like it's opiate like, and some people have said it has some stimulant like effects, but in Thailand it's been used for the longest time as like a pain reliever, right? And like workers, they would just take kratom like before they went to work just to make like, you know, like their lives like more effective, you know, get through like work more efficiently, like when you're like doing like manual labor, like things like that. You just take the kratom and you go to it. You know, it's like it's a normal thing.
So what is it? Is like
It's an opiate like plant. So it produces
Okay.
like similar effects of
Oh,
like,
but it's
pain
like
relief.
so it's not as like crazy. It's not like super
Yeah.
potent. Okay.
Right. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
like it is potent, but like it's not like insanely habit forming, I believe, as you know, like the opiates were prescribing. But like, essentially, like the Thailand government, I believe they made kratom illegal just to sell more opioids to the public, because you know, like because it was they put a tax on opioids, so people started using kratom back in like the 1800s, I believe.
Hmm.
And then they banned kratom so they could just get that cut of like the taxes.
Mhm.
You know,
That's
it's
weird.
a money move. Yeah,
Yeah,
I have to-
money talks.
money, and it's sad. You know, it's really sad that for each and every drug, people are going to have to make an economic argument for them to become legal. You know,
Well, I mean, it is what drives things forward. I mean, it's
Right.
not ideal, but you know, that's how everything goes. That's probably how we're gonna get to space. It's what it's looking like now. It's might be how we decriminalize drugs.
yeah, Elon Musk, Colson 100.
I thought we were gonna go this whole thing without like a reference to like a Reddit meme.
If you talk about space and then like you're like hinting towards Elon Musk, I'm totally gonna say Reddit. Like, yeah,
Slash
dude.
SpaceX.
I have a bone to pick with Elon.
No,
Really?
let's not get into that.
Yeah, did you not know about like he's a guy essentially like a worker at like the mega plant or whatever. He brought forth like documents saying like, look, you know, Tesla is wasting a lot of materials. Like they're like really inefficient with the production of their solar cells. Like here's proof. Like there's like so much scrap being like just thrown away and not like reused at all. It's not good. And Elon Musk found personally, he did this personally. He found the guy who leaked those documents and said that and called the local police, told them that he was going to shoot up the mega plant, and effectively he swatted him. He swatted the guy. Like these documents, and like, yeah. So like these small town cops like come into this guy's house, and this dude's just crying and crying. He's like, he's like, what did I do? You know. So I think, and I believe his higher ups at the plant, they like talked to him about it, and they were like, look, we know you did it, and like they were kind of fine with it, but like Elon kept on instigating this. He made this man's life like a living hell just for like leaking these docs, because it would affect like, you know, his investors, you know, like if real?
Tesla, maybe he didn't.
It's real. This is real.
Are they actually wasting stuff? I like how that's what I'm more concerned about. That's weird.
Yeah, I think it's real. I found this Bloomberg article about it.
Yeah, why when Elon Musk tried to destroy Tesla whistleblower, what is his name? Martin Tripp.
Are we saying the name? All right.
No, I mean there's a whole thing on it.
Oh, okay.
Scrapping 40% of the raw materials at its Gigafactory.
Well, I hope it's
40%. I hope
Hopefully.
it got better too. I mean, like,
because okay, as much as that's fucked up. There's two. Okay, no more. I'm out. As much as that's messed up, I think that that company hopefully is like our path to the future. And I don't know. I'm not saying I'm excusing that behavior. It's not excusable, but I believe in Tesla. I believe in SpaceX.
Yeah.
And I believe in legalizing drugs, and I believe you should go learn jujitsu.
Yeah.
Take anything away from this podcast.
That's Doug's political platform. Vote for him, 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. I mean, as much as I don't like Elon Musk, I'm not gonna discredit like the value of things like Tesla in our society. Like they kind of just, I mean, people will joke about them all the time, and you know, like
oh,
just make fun of them as cars, but like they oftentimes like do pay for like themselves in a lot of ways. Like I've seen like people who are like literally like the only thing I've had to pay for with like my Tesla after like the cost of like the car and then like the household like solar thing is just like fixing my windshield wiper. Like that's the only thing they had to pay for.
They're awesome cars. Have you ever been in one?
No, I haven't.
Dude, I went in Mitch's.
I drove her Tesla.
Dude,
it's very smooth.
You drove it?
Yeah.
She wouldn't let me.
Lucky.
I mean, I didn't want it. Dude, she was like there's like this curvy ass road near my house, and she was just like down. I was freaking out. I was in like the back seat. I was like, I was gonna throw, or maybe I was front seat. But my favorite part is like the windshield goes up, and I'm looking up, and I'm like, I can see the sky. I was like freaking out.
So we were talking about Tesla, which a lot of people see as like the successor to modern cars, but like still in the racing scene, most of them are operated by gas. So NASCAR has announced that they're reopening at least 2 races later this month in June, with one of them holding 1,000 people and the other holding 5,000 people. Do you think it's kind of too soon to reopen like this size of like social gathering in a sense? Or do you think it'd be better to keep transmissions down and not reopen?
I think it's a bad idea. I think it's a very bad idea. Because not only is it like a huge social gathering of thousands of people, it's also NASCAR fans, and you know they're not washing their hands. No
Well,
offense, NASCAR fans.
they say in the article that they'll enforce social distancing,
Right.
but it's a little tough when it's that many people.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
guess it would be. Yeah.
I was gonna
mean,
say,
how are you
like-
gonna have like 5,000 people sit 6 feet apart?
Hmm.
Like, think
Yeah.
about that.
No,
5
wasn't it
times
like
6 feet.
1,000 or 2,000?
One of them's 1,000 and one of them's 5,000.
So between
Oh,
6,000 and 30,000 feet of just seating.
That's definitely possible. Like, have you seen like a NASCAR stadium?
It's
No one's
pretty
gonna
big.
do it. No
They're
one's
big.
gonna do it.
They're big.
It
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. I feel like it's a bit too soon, but at the same time, like, I think now your safety is up to you.
Mhm.
You can decide whether or not you're going to stay 6 feet away from people or not. And if people
Mhm.
come within 6 feet of you, you can. It's your absolute right to like tell them, "Hey, I'm going to move, this way 3 feet," or "I'm telling you to move this way 3 feet." Like,
Mhm.
it's your safety is up in your own hands, kind of right now. And like, I'm glad like companies and stuff like that are like doing their best to sort of like enforce CDC guidelines themselves, but a lot of it right now is it's up to you.
Mhm.
I
This
don't
old
know.
lady, I was in the bread yard at Stop and Shop up here, which is basically like Publix, but worse.
Wait,
And I
where
was
are you?
walking
That's not
in Connecticut.
Publix.
In Connecticut.
Oh, you're in Connecticut.
And so
So-
essentially, I was walking in the bread aisle to get like a loaf of English muffins, and she was like, "I guess we don't follow rules anymore." Like I was like, What's happening?" Because I had a mask on, and I was like, What do you mean?" Because like she is so small in essence, and I was like looking at her, and she's like, she would pointed at the floor, and it's like, what? So I went down the wrong way of the aisle,
Oh,
and she had
yeah.
gotten mad at me, and I was like, I didn't even see the arrow. It's
Instead of
just
doing that
so
Publix.
strange. But like, do you think those kinds of arrows are really effective?
I haven't even seen it. Like, really? I haven't been out more than like
I went
3
to
times.
Publix and people were going up and down them like they normally would, and nobody really
Exactly.
enforced it.
People, I think there's a different air in Florida. I noticed like not even half people are wearing masks, but up here, everyone
almost
is
no
wearing
one
a
is.
mask because the governor has mandated. I don't know if DeSantis did, but the governor up here, Lamont, he mandated like to enter a business, you need to wear a mask unless you have health reasons not to. Like, what's a health reason not to wear a mask?
Maybe like asthma, you can't breathe as
Maybe.
well. I
I don't
mean,
know.
who knows?
I don't know.
Also, I'm sure like people up there, their brains are less sun-baked, so.
Yeah,
helps.
that's true. So this next story I wanted to bring up, it's pretty minor, but so in Jacksonville, or it was reported in Jacksonville, but UF tweeted on Monday night that it denied a prospective student over a racist comment for the fall of 2020 admissions. We can assume that this happened. Well, they made it seem like it had happened after the June 1st decision day because the tweet was on June 8th, which like means he didn't have another college to essentially fall back on. Do you think like this is an appropriate action on a college, even though it's like past decision day?
I don't know why they would do
Um,
it so publicly. Like, what's the point?
Yeah, they didn't publish the name, but like they just said
No.
that they did it. It's very strange.
Why are they like? When was this? So this
This
is
was
when?
June 8th. June 8th, so 2 days ago.
That's super weird. I don't know. Maybe they're like trying to cash in on like the it's super important to like show your support for like what's going on right now.
Mhm.
But maybe I'm sure that they part of the reason they tweeted that is to do with that.
Right.
Mhm.
I feel like maybe they didn't have to like make it public, but at the same
Exactly.
time, I definitely like don't. I'm not gonna like argue with a college on whether or not they can like kick out a student like after the fact. Like if a student applies, you're admitting them based on who they make themselves out to be. If
Mhm.
UF does not want to have a campus where people like if they don't want like racist people like on their campus, even if it's just like a remark, then they have every right to like deny him for that. And
Mhm.
because they're trying to like cultivate like their school. So yeah, I mean that seems completely like in their realm of like fairness. For me, it's going to suck for him
Yeah,
if
Mhm.
poor kid. I mean,
he's not gonna have
hopefully,
a backup. But was it like a really old comment or is it like
yeah.
recent?
Was he like? Do we know if
I'm
like he
not.
was
That's all the
actually
tweet said.
That's all
That
Sue said.
they denied a prospective student.
like? It could have. I would feel really bad if it was like a joke that was just taken way too far or something.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Obviously we don't know now,
just
but there's a lot of that where like it's someone will like tweet something with the N word and like when they were 14, and then like years later it comes to bite them in the ass. It's like
yeah,
shit. How are they supposed to know? They probably didn't even remember sending the tweet. And it's
yeah,
you're supposed to better yourself by going to like higher education. I feel like just not at all. It not maybe this situation was different, but I don't think it should be like, oh, you said something that was like race related in the past. You're now just bye. You're done forever.
Hmm.
Yeah, there has to be like opportunity for someone to move on and to better themselves.
I
In
know. Yeah.
some situations, not all situations.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's like if it's crazy, like if you were like killing people in the name of terrorism against certain races, then it's like no, you're off the list. But like you know you guys understand what I'm trying to say.
right. I don't know. I guess like if he obviously is, it was obviously like public enough for UF to see it, and if you're gonna make comments like that out in the open,
Yeah, it might be
it's up on you.
exactly.
But I definitely don't agree with like people dredging up like really old tweets like years and years after they've been like sent and
Like the
using it
James
as like
Gunn tweets,
ammunition.
that was always
Yeah,
where I saw it most prevalent. That was like a good example. It's
yeah,
like that was like what? That was like 10 years old or not 10 years old. It was like 8
right.
or 10. Like crazy. A lot of time has had passed. Like I think about you or I 10 years ago. I mean, that's a little different because we were barely adults. I'm barely an adult.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So one thing that's connected to this, so Kyle Kashuv was a student at Parkland who had gotten into Harvard, but then he got his acceptance revoked because they found out about racist writings when he was 16. So this is kind of similar. Um, so he was in a Facebook group called Harvard Memes. I'm not going to read this for uh, horny people, essentially, and it was
What?
like making
What?
Holocaust. It was making Holocaust jokes, essentially.
Wait, send us the name. Maybe I'll read it.
Here, I'll
Is it
send
bad?
it.
Should I say it?
I mean, it's not that. I already said like
What?
half of it. It's like Harvard memes for horny bourgeois teens. And it's like making fun of various racial and ethnic groups. So like
Oh.
to the extent like it's still like a net cost analysis because like these prestigious universities like they want people like who survived Parkland in essence for like the clout. That's why like Ivy Leagues. That's why like UPenn admitted Trump's daughters, even though like clearly they might not be qualified to go to UPenn.
Yeah. Or
They want it for the
money.
clout to say like we have
Money
these people on our
talks.
campus. Exactly, money talks.
Yeah.
So, in a sense, do you think he should be like reflected on for something he did when he was like maybe a sophomore?
I think this is a very case by case thing.
Yeah.
I tend to look at things like case by case bases. Case by case bases.
Well, I mean, like,
Good bad name.
did he share it with like the Harvard chat? Like, obviously, like he would have gotten into the Harvard chat after getting into Harvard, right?
Yeah, and
Was
then
it
no one
his
else
co-
in the
But this
chat got
says he was
busted.
16.
Right.
Wait,
But
what?
like, what?
This is super confusing. Maybe it was like memes for horny bourgeois teens.
Oh,
And then like
did he make like a
Harvard said
conscious
it.
decision to like send
Apparently,
it to
he
that
used
group
the
chat?
N word. Essentially, he used the N word, and then they were circulating like in bad faith memes.
Yeah, that might. Well, so he got into the college. So he got into Harvard. Did he get into Harvard right out of high school? So he was like 17, 18. It was like a year and a half difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it stands to reason he's probably making the same jokes for a little while after. So like maybe he like I don't know. I don't think that I'm qualified to make a reflection of a person's character just based on like jokes it. I would have to know the kid and see the acceptance letter, but I don't know. I'm not close enough to say at this point, but I think that's a good reason to like take like a second look or they consider revoking his entrance.
Makes sense.
Yes,
One of the
right.
one of the things I wanted to bring up is like with education, it's like the main setting that people would probably like learn to change their thoughts. I
Exactly.
thought about this particularly about the UF story because like what if he wouldn't be racist after he went to UF, but now that he's not going to UF, he might not go to college. We don't know because we don't know who this person is. Then he'll just be a racist for the rest of his life. So like what's the role of like higher education in that sense?
Hopefully this changes his mind. Hopefully this is like a slap in the face, and maybe he betters himself. Maybe he even reapplies to UF. But I mean, there's also plenty of bad people that get into good schools. Like, we know a few that have done it. We're not going to say names on this podcast because we're here to do.
Yep.
We all know it. It is a place to go change yourself, and I hope that like maybe he does get into like maybe he goes to community college and like works his way around, figures things out, and like betters himself as a person. But again, it's another situation of like I can't make a moral judgment on someone just because from like we don't even know who this guy is. We don't know what he said. We don't know what the racist comment was. We have like almost no information.
No
We're just looking at
context, yeah.
hypotheticals at this point right now.
Yeah.
There is, and context I think is important in a lot of situations. A lot of people are like, context doesn't matter. It totally does. Like if I say like, I've said the F word twice in this podcast. If I was saying the F word twice in a first grade classroom, I would be in way more S word than I am right now. So context is very important, in my opinion.
Yeah,
No.
I agree.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts, JD?
No, I definitely feel like higher education has a role in like socializing like students and challenging their perceptions on every single front. However, colleges do try to, cultivate a sort of experience on their campus. And if that experience is like, look, we don't want people like making racist comments on our campus, then I feel like that's fine. I feel like we shouldn't I feel like if you say like if he went to college, he wouldn't be racist or he wouldn't be making these remarks. It just makes it sound like college is now just like this place where you become unracist. Like no, like
yeah. It's hypotheticals, yeah.
Right. I don't know. I feel like that's just kind of like a bit reductive. So maybe. I don't know. It's not like you see this guy's tweet and like yeah, let's let him in. He might not be racist like coming out of college. It's like no, like I see their I see their decision to like not like let him in. Like just viewing it from like the perspective of UF. Like personally I believe like one comment isn't gonna like shouldn't like determine like the course of your like entire life, depending on the context of it, of course. But yeah, I don't know. Like I guess I don't sympathize with the student too much, just because of like looking at it from like the perspective of the college.
Sure.
I wanted to pivot onto another issue. So we all know that climate change essentially would impact Florida the most. And it's kind of ironic because I think there was one figure that like by 2050, Mar-a-Lago, which is an estate owned by Trump, would be like underwater essentially. So since it's the most at risk, we've seen like even like climate skeptics in a sense, or by 2050, yeah. In a sense, DeSantis used to be like a climate skeptic, but we've seen him even now like hiring advisors for like climate mitigation because it's real, the risk that's being posed. Do you think there's like any actions that like as a state Florida can take outside of the national level to like mitigate climate change?
Oh God.
I wouldn't know any.
Make everyone buy a
Not-
Tesla.
I'm
We have
not,
plenty of
like-
sun, so.
I'm not.
I don't know what like the power plant companies here do. I don't know how like regular the currents are because we don't have a lot of cold convection currents when it comes to water in the Gulf of Mexico. It's like relatively shallow for like such a large body of water. So I think that could be total bullshit.
That's true, that's
I'm not a geologist, but maybe some form of like water wind turbine that like generates electricity that could be helpful. Obviously we get a lot of sun during most months that aren't summer because summer get a lot of showers. That could be helpful, but there's like all sorts of stuff that like we could be doing that we aren't. I think
Mhm.
I'm super into the idea of hitting climate change on all fronts that we can. It's that and okay, look, I'm not diminishing the importance of other political issues. Obviously, systemic racism, super important. Obviously, universal healthcare, all these things are incredibly important. But if we don't fix climate change, we're not gonna have a rock to call home. Like that is the end all be all, most important change we need to make this century if we are to continue as a species in a comfortable manner. We need to like make measures and take things into our own hands and change what is going on. And we have to try and revert what we can and undo the bad things we have done as best we can. I don't know all the ways we could. Everyone's got ideas, but we need to put ourselves together and figure that out for sure.
Okay.
You agree, JD?
Yeah, I mean, I agree that like way more effort needs to be put into like climate change. I don't know anything like any specific like hypothetical policies that could be used to mitigate it.
Mhm.
I kind of need to like look more into that. I need to take it upon myself to kind of become more educated on that stuff. And
We need to listen to the scientists, I think, because they
Mhm.
probably know what's going on. And more and more people are, thank God, but maybe not early enough.
Right.
Hopefully.
Mhm.
well, I guess the short of it is like I don't want to see Florida underwater. So, I mean,
I
whatever is
wouldn't-
necessary.
It wouldn't be so bad losing Florida, but
I'd rather not.
I'd rather not, but if we had to lose a state, Florida.
New Mexico. No, not New
I
Mexico.
don't even know what New Mexico.
No,
They have like
Nebraska.
pigs in it, right?
But what? No, New
Nebraska?
Mexico.
No, Nebraska. No. He's
No,
from Montana. I was gonna say
Nebraska.
Edward Angel is from Montana. Never mind.
Wait, what is he?
I thought no. He,
Okay,
I
never
thought he.
mind. Never mind. That's for the EAPC podcast, Douglas.
Yeah, which we're plugging for a second time. The APC
totally,
podcast,
totally.
probably
It's real.
probably coming soon.
It's real. It's real.
It's real. Is that? Do we hit all the
Israel
bases?
so much? Why don't you visit it? Throws you out the window.
Did we hit all? I think we hit all the points. That's surprising.
Yeah.
Almost all of them.
Almost. I left this
Is there
one
any
for
more?
last. It was on
Okay.
COVID. So
Oh, no.
we've seen a recent increase in COVID cases and deaths. That's
I'm
like
not
I think
surprised.
we're at like 11,000 cases, which we were at like 6,000 at the beginning of May. So we've seen like the highest daily count since Florida started tracking cases in March. Do you think this is due to an increase in testing or that we lifted restrictions too soon and more people are getting coronavirus?
I think more people are getting it, probably.
Mm.
I mean, obviously testing's gotten better since we've started because we've been paying more attention to it. But the experts are already saying we were going to have a second wave, and that was even without like the massive civil unrest that's happening now, and all these protests happening and people like being in these huge conglomerations close together. I'm not saying the protests aren't important; they are very important, and I definitely support them. But we are definitely going to see a second wave, and it might be worse than the first. Honestly, I hope they get this vaccine figured out soon because we're going to need it. God knows it.
I have heard that since coronavirus hit us like in March, it was like the end of the winter essentially, but
Mhm.
if we had like a whole flu season which starts in the fall, the second wave will be so much worse because a lot of people still haven't even contracted coronavirus.
Yeah.
So it's like a
Yeah.
whole new issue.
We're having like this now where a lot of people are tightly packed again in public, not wearing masks, a lot of them in close physical contact. People are just going out normally now. I was inside for I think my count was like 64 days, like a whole stack of days. And
I just realized that.
Minecraft stack. Yeah, Nick made
Yeah.
that joke. I just stole that. Thanks, Nick. But no, I've been out like 3 whole times, and almost all the times I've gone out, I have seen almost no one wearing masks.
Yeah.
I went out once to go to drive my mom. No. I went once to drop off my textbooks at school. Once I went to therapy, and I drove my mom somewhere, and then once to the beach. That's it. But almost no one's been wearing masks, almost at all, except me. I wear masks. I think people need to wear masks. I think we need to do the 6 feet thing. But I don't know. We were obviously going to have more cases. It's inevitable that more cases were going to happen. But I think the acceleration is going to be a lot greater now that we've got all this stuff compounding on each other. Businesses reopening, the protests. We've got people like seeing friends again. It's summer, so like kids are going down to like where they used to live and hanging out,
Right.
having fun. There was a lot of people that just didn't once stop. Like a lot of the people that I went to school with at Riverview didn't once stop. Not for a second. And part of me wants to like be really mad at them, but like, God, this is for me. I'm a senior. I'm done with school. I'm never gonna have like a proper prom, graduation, or any of that, and it's really sad. It's my first year not having to be at school, and it's getting delayed, and it sucks a lot. But I think we need to respect the virus
Hmm.
Right.
more than we are.
Do you think schools will reopen in the fall, like universities and high schools both in Florida?
I don't know.
Not my problem.
Yeah, I'm not the one who's on the school board having to come up with that. It's up to them. I think there has to be some measures taken in place. Like we cannot just open up school like normal.
Unless they
Because-
figure things out by then, which would be miraculous.
Well, there are
Right.
like two levels. So it's either the state like mandates something and then the counties have to obey, or it's up to the counties. And then the county has released two plans. Essentially, either A, there's no social distancing and like there's increased like measures to prevent spread, or the CDC 6 foot rule is still in effect. And then like high schoolers would still be online. And then elementary and middle schoolers are spread out across all the campuses.
Okay.
That'd be
So
super weird.
it'd be very strange
Yeah.
because like you have high schoolers, which I mean, you can make the point that like elementary school is more important for your development, but
Probably.
Just- I
Yeah.
just don't see starting a whole year when there's already a deficit of knowledge.
Right.
I have a ton of trouble with homeschool. I was homeschooled for a year on FLVS, and it was the worst year of my life. And then I was really happy to be back, even at a school where I wasn't with all my friends. I had to go to a different school, but I was super glad that I was doing it. And then we got shoved into this, and so I really empathize with people that have like a lot of trouble homeschooling. But I think if we have to do it, we have to do it. We just got to stick it out. It's not the
Right.
worst thing in the world.
I know Virginia as a state has pledged like they will reopen schools. Do you think it's like
Oh,
too
really?
soon to make like
course.
such a
Yeah.
decision? Yeah.
I would say so for
What
sure.
comes out of Virginia? Hey,
Did
disappointment.
you,
I don't know.
Do you know Virginia is the most flown over state?
really?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
No one wants to stop. I've been so mean to other states. I'm sorry. If you're from another state, I'm just playing. I don't really mean it.
From Nebraska.
Unless you're from like Wyoming or something.
All right. I had one last question.
Like
It was at
gravel
the
there.
end of the doc. So the 2024 election, people are already looking to because
Uh-oh.
like, I don't want to say 2020 has already been called for Joe, but it seems pretty likely.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So this Politico article says that like all three, Rick Scott, Marco Rubio and Governor
Oh.
DeSantis are all posturing to run in 2024. And it's like a power play. Like,
Dude, come on, Yang. Come on. Just run
Who do you
again,
think
please.
on the Republican ticket, who do you think would have like the best chance of securing the nomination out of all three of
I
them?
don't know. Rick Scott, he's old and he's bald.
Like he has like the numbers to prove he did a good job as a senator or as a we lost JD.
Well, I'm the only one that's going to be voting this year. I'm sure he'll
There
be
you
back
go.
soon. Well, I'm voting for Biden. I'm not voting for Trump. If he is running again, right?
Hmm?
Did Trump come out and say that he is running
Oh
again?
yeah, no, he announced in 2016.
Okay, I thought so. But I'm voting for Biden this year. For the Republican candidacy, I really don't know. Rubio is a handsome fella, and he's later on immigration, right? So I wouldn't be too surprised if we see that, because he's going to have a lot of the minority appeal there, and
Mhm.
Latinos and Hispanics are swiftly becoming the main largest demographic in the United States. I don't know if it's already surpassed
yet.
white
It's about to.
Caucasian, but I think it will soon, or it's predicted to soon. So I wouldn't be too surprised if we see Rubio. I really don't know, though. It's hard to say this far out. We're not even at the 2020 election. I think I think the 2020 election and whoever wins it and how it goes is going to like make a huge impact on the next one, as all
Definitely.
elections do.
Mhm.
But I couldn't say.
I think we've gotten through most of the stuff I wanted to talk about at least. Is there anything you want to say before we end off the podcast?
Should we get JD back to say bye?
That's what I want. I pinged him, but
Let's see. Let's just see what's happening. This is very unprofessional. I'll ping him too.
there we go.
Maybe he needs to. Is he back?
No?
All right. Well, if he doesn't come back, I do want to say from JD and I, look out for the EAPC podcast or EAPC or EA podcast, which it might
What
be
does that
known
stand for?
as.
Oh, admin.
It's a little bit. We're not quite sure. Oh,
Sorry,
We got him back.
my laptop died.
that's hilarious.
Charge it out.
We're about to end out. JD, who did you think is going to win 2024? Use your foresight.
Out of the three.
Rick.
I said Rubio. Okay.
You think Rick?
I don't know. I don't like Rick, but I don't like any of them.
I
But,
don't. Yeah, me neither. Hopefully,
I don't know.
someone new that's like at
Rick
least-
or Rubio, actually. Yeah,
I think
don't
Rubio
know.
has the best chance because he already has a national name recognition from running in 2016.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, now I think of it, yeah, that's true.
Plus the minority vote's gonna help him out.
He also
Mhm.
did he not show up to Congress at all? Like in
Really?
When he ran, but that
He
happens
ran,
for
when he
anyone
ran.
who's running.
Oh, okay.
Right. I don't know. Like I remember he got like lambasted because they're like he doesn't even show up to Congress. Like what is he doing? But I don't
That
know.
happens to everyone though.
Yeah.
JD, you didn't use your F word yet.
Yeah, I did.
Did you?
I did.
We
I
got
think I
the
used
three.
it twice. I think we went over 3.
You went. Oh,
I might mutter
Bro.
it. I think I tried to like silence
yeah. I
it.
think I remember you stifling it. I did too. I know I did too. I was counting.
I think I might have let one go. I don't know.
That's probably fine.
I thought it
Right.
was. I thought PG-13 was you could say it once and not 3
Thought it was
times.
once.
I thought it was 3 times. Is it
I'm
once?
pretty-
I heard
think
once
it's
for
once.
film.
Yeah.
Mm.
Isn't
Okay. Well, we're like TV something 18. I don't know.
All right. Is there anything you wanted to say before we ended off, JD?
no? This
EAPC.
is very good.
EAPC.
Yeah. Tune into the
Tune into the
EAPC
NPC
podcast.
podcast.
What
Yeah.
does that stand for?
We can't say it here.
Yeah, we can't say it.
We can't say it here on this NPR-esque discussion.
Yeah, the
Um,
Edward Angelette podcast is going
The
to be
Edward Angelize
PC. Which is,
P Collective.
yeah, something. We're just calling it
What?
Edward Angelite's podcast.
I don't know. We'll go with. I don't know.
It's going to be like a more.
We've Doug has been like
Sticking
pushing for
around.
this forever.
It's going to be so fun. It's just
He-
gonna
no,
be
literally, like,
5 friends
forever.
sticking around.
What did you come up with it when we watched Uncut Gems? Was that it? I think that was
I mean,
it.
well,
I think that was the
EAPC has
birth.
always like
Existed, yeah.
EAPC has existed for a while, and then we had the idea of doing this a podcast at some point, just because we were like Nick. I think Nick or
Nick hated
someone.
it.
Nick hated it. Well, no, that was an inspiration, but I think we came up with it before Nick joined,
Yeah.
where we were just coming up with we were like reverse acronyming